Today, I am going to do what no other reptile YouTuber has done before. Give my opinion on a controversial matter. I know. It could be the one that ends it all, boys. This could be the video that ends DBCB Exotics. I mean, in 2022, giving your opinion on the internet? Do you have a death wish? Truly, in my heart, I feel like this needs to be said, and I think I've got some good old counterpoints to go along with it, so let's get into what this opinion actually is. That opinion that I am stating right now is going to be for the fact that I fully believe that reptiles should cost way more than what they are right now. I know, hang on guys, whoa, hang on, just give me a second, hear me out. In order to better understand why I feel this way, let's talk about the free market with animals. Now, when it comes to selling animals, there really is no hurdle when it comes to it. There's no regulation or anything of that sort. I believe dogs and cats might have something, you know, with AKC, that might do something to inhibit the market, or I actually don't know what AKC does whatsoever. I know it's like not like necessarily a good thing. I don't get it. For when we get into the more exotic lifestyle of animal keeping, it is a completely free market. People can charge whatever they want to charge, and it just is what it is. When I'm talking about this, I'm not gonna get into the mutation side of things, because let's be honest, for a newcomer coming into the hobby, mutations make absolutely no sense. You can imagine a thing that goes on in someone's head when they look at an expo, find a tokay gecko for $15, and yet when we have one that just has a little bit more red onto it instead of the blue, you can tack on $3,500 to that price tag. It can get a little wild, to say the least. No, today I want to talk about the reptiles in general, the normal boys, the low-end mutations, the mutations in the animals that are going for a cheap price, and why I think it's just completely wrong. We'll get into the first hot take for today, and that's going to be cheap prices equal neglect. Comes to animals that are going to be one of the most neglected, I gotta say reptiles have to be pretty high up on that list. I'm gonna say a close second. I believe fish are the most neglected, seen as a thrown away pet. God, those poor comet goldfish. I can only imagine the short hell they live in, a goldfish bowl, and then slowly suffocate in their own fish pee. Now, when it comes to the animals that seem to get neglected the most, in my opinion, I'm gonna put that list in the Savannah Nile monitor, the corn snakes, the leopard gecko, and bearded dragons. Now, what do all those animals have in common? Because that's a pretty sheer difference. We've got a snake, we've got some small 10-inch geckos, and we've got large 6-feet monitors. What could possibly all of those animals have in common with each other? It's gonna be the fact that they are all dirt cheap. You can get all of those animals for the low price of starting as low as $10 to somewhere around $60. Even your average Petco to PetSmart, you can find bearded dragons for somewhere around $50 to $60. The best beginner lizard. Except for the fact that that lizard actually needs something like a 4-foot by 2-foot by 2-foot vivarium, expensive UVB lighting, basking bulbs, a very pretty intense diet when we're going to someone that doesn't understand husbandry whatsoever, and just controversy around how to care for it at all. But are people really gonna think about that when the fact of the matter is the only detriment to them is pulling 3 20s out of their wallet and giving it to the cashier? It's not really seen as much of a second guess because, oh, if the thing dies, you can just go pull out 3 more 20s and get a new one. It's a really sad sight to see. It's a really sad sight to see. It's a really sad sight to see. It's a really sad sight to see, and I wish I could say that every person that buys an animal actually takes in consideration the animal's life and the welfare, and if that animal were to perish, they would be extremely sad by that, and in that case, that could be their inspiration to actually care and properly take care of the animal. But that's not the case. At the end of the day, when we're talking about the general public and the new people coming into the hobby, or people that don't even want to be in the hobby, just want to get a little reptile for the little boy and girl because a dog's too much of a commitment, but the $60 lizard, that's not that much of a commitment. Crap scenario, but that's the world we live in. Money talks. Money talks a lot. Now, you guys can say at the end of the day that you live for the animals, that every animal is as valuable as the other one, and I would completely agree with that sentiment. I would love to. that's not the case, unfortunately, even subconsciously. Now, I'm not saying I do not care for all of my animals here. Of course, they were all well taken care of and thriving. However, when it comes to a good example of my tokay geckos, the $15 wild caught I got, while living a good life, living in a nice enclosure with proper husbandry, may not get the time in the world and that little extra perfectness that I give to my $3,500 Super Red Tokay. It's just kind of the way it is. Again, don't take me out of context. I know some of you will do that. All the animals are well taken care for, and I love every single one of them. However, that Super Red Tokay, it gets just a little bit more attention, and I keep just a little bit more of a close eye on that, just because of the fact that if that thing were to die, that would suck. I believe that a larger price tag would solve a lot of these issues. While, however, yes, we would get less people getting into the hobby and getting animals, we would also have a lot less neglected animals and a lot less early deaths. I truly believe we have some sort of problem when you can take the Savannah monitor that has an expected lifespan in captivity of 10 plus years, however, the majority of them are dying within their first year of keeping. You can't help but wonder maybe that $20 price tag has at least something to do with it. The point I want to talk about, these reptiles take just as long to reproduce, take care of to full term of selling as most conventional other animals, so why are we undervaluing the work that we do as a reptile breeder? This is where it's gonna get a little dicey, but I'm gonna keep going with it. Now, let's talk about dog breeding versus lizard breeding. In my humble opinion, I do believe dog breeding is a much easier task than it is breeding reptiles. We've got the dogs that do it, the mom gets pregnant, she has her litter of puppies, and the mom takes care of those puppies, and then you get them, and you can sell puppies really, really fast, because it's a cute, adorable puppy. I mean, who doesn't want one of those? In the meantime, here you are breeding lizards, getting those eggs, incubating those eggs in your somewhat expensive incubator, hatching those babies, making sure those babies are good to go because you're the one that has to feed them, not the mom. Having those reptiles good for the 4 to 6 weeks it takes until they are ready to sell at that proper weight, proper age, and then at that point selling that reptile. And yet the puppies are going for $1,200 to $1,500 at your standard whatever, and then you're selling yours for $60 to $100? Where's the logic in that? Okay, I can see the comments coming right now at me. Dogs are a much more desirable animal. There's a much larger market for dogs, whereas reptiles are still a little bit more obscure. However, I would argue the fact that reptiles are becoming much more popular of a pet these days than what they were 20 to 30 years ago. But I understand the thing, you know, there are billions of dog people that want to get dogs, whereas there's somewhere around, I think, 1 million reptile keepers. The diversity, it's pretty severe. There's a much bigger market, I get it. But okay, I'll add one more. Let's compare it to another exotic animal community, and that is going to be birds. Avians. Avians. The bird community, birds. I think birds are a great example of how we can comparatively check the market from reptiles to birds. Now, it's gonna be pretty similar. I used to work with birds, I worked for years, I've raised birds, bred them, hatched the eggs, hand-fed, sold the birds. That was kind of like my thing before I was really getting into reptiles. And the process is pretty much the same. The birds lay, you get some sort of nest box, whether that be the peat moss in the deli cup or an actual nest box with hay in it. The birds lay the eggs, you incubate those eggs, or you just let the parents incubate it, depending on what style you want to go for. Eggs hatch, mothers raise it for like a week, you pull them, hand raise them. Now, granted, the hand raising gets a little bit more, you get a little, doing the hand raise, because you get a syringe full of bird food and you shoot it into the gullet of the bird. That's how you hand raise birds. But it's a little more intense. However, comparatively speaking, you know, sometimes you get a little droplet and you put the crested gecko next to it and it eats it. Sometimes you get a syringe and you all that food right into the crop of that bird. It's pretty similar. Similarities keep going now. We can get into the starter birds, the conures, cockatiels, things of that nature. They give somewhere around the same amount of eggs, the point of 4 to 6, however they can double clutch, getting somewhere around 8 to 12 in that kind of range. Those babies require pretty much the same amount of space, a 2x2x4 for a cockatiel, somewhere around that bird cage size, a 4x2x2 for a bearded dragon, and yet when we're talking about just the base morph, the normal cockatiel versus the normal bearded dragon, you've got an animal that is $200 to $400 where you can get a bearded dragon for $60. Why? Both hypoallergenic, both live around the same amount of time, both require pretty good in-depth care, both have their downsides and negative attributes. Granted, I think cockatiels have way more negative attributes than a bearded dragon. Have you ever had a bird scream at you for hours to hours on end? They take a lot more cares, a lot more in-depth stuff, a lot more time you need to take with a cockatiel versus the amount of time that you can take for a bearded dragon. However, for some reason, the cockatiel goes for a lot more than your standard bearded dragon. Why? It'll take a lot of time to reproduce, breed, and successfully hatch. Both are obscurities and minorities in the animal keeping side. So why do we base the reptile price so low when other people aren't? That's something that just boggles my mind. Number 3, and my last point of the day. Some people should not be owning certain reptiles. Some of these reptiles can be a little bit dangerous. While most of the time not completely life-threatening, however, some can cause some pretty large bodily harm. And at that point, we should not have inexperienced people or people that don't know what they're doing and can't properly care for those animals. We shouldn't be able to let those people have these reptiles and get them into their hands. And yet, we do. Switch gears into the big boy game of keeping reptiles. Not crested geckos, leopard geckos, and bearded dragons, but reticulated pythons, large monitor lizards, crocodilians, venomous, all of these things that, for most people, or at least quite a few, should not have these animals. Yet, you can get them pretty obtainably for the small price tag that we put on them for some reason. Now, this is the part that just really boggles my mind, people. I cannot believe, comparatively speaking to the rest of the exotic community, why we have these animals at such an incredibly low price. It's crazy. They're gonna be the type of animals that you see in exhibit at zoos. You know, the thing that everyone aspires to go to, you know, oh, I'd love to have this animal. You can get this animal at the zoo. However, most of the time, it costs tens of thousands of dollars to privately own those animals. Except reptiles, where you can get some for $200. I get it, the price tag is such a small contribution to what are you actually going to be doing for this animal later on. We're talking about things like enclosure sizes, building the actual habitat for the animal, the stuff that needs to go in it for the animal, all the husbandry stuff, the deep substrate, the big cages, the food for some of these monitor lizards. My God, when you start getting multiple monitor lizards, man, it gets very expensive. Personally, I've never been bit by any of my large species that I'm keeping. I've been tail whipped by my male Argus bimson quite a few times. I couldn't even imagine the pain of that bite from an almost 5-foot lizard would be. It wouldn't feel good. It would probably be very painful. However, I knew the risks. Buying a large lizard very, very seriously. I did all my research. I sought out to a good breeder. By the way, shout out to Joe Casterlin. And man, did I fucking barrage that guy with questions for over a year. He was such a good sport. He answered every question that I had. And then finally, a year after meeting Joe Castellan, I finally bought one of his Argus monitors. Still here today, an absolutely amazing monitor lizard. I've had it for a couple of years now, and now we've gone up to a 1.2 trio of a breeding group of Argus monitors. I hope one day to breed my own and produce my own babies. However, while I did that personally, and how seriously I took what it took to actually purchase a large monitor lizard, how many other people are really doing the same? Just going back to the first point of money talks. Now, how many people are going to do their due diligent research and take this very seriously when you can end up getting a 7-foot monitor lizard for $20 and an 18-foot snake, 18 to 20+ foot snake for somewhere around $200? How much are you going to do when you have the money right now in your pocket and you can just impulse buy this animal? How well do you think that's gonna go? Side note, why are we breeding so many reticulated pythons? I mean, this has gotta be ridiculous. There is no way this many people can house these retics. I won't understand for the life of me. There are thousands of reticulated pythons out for sale right now. Where are these thousands of people that are gonna be able to house these 18-foot snakes? Oh, they're not. They're probably just gonna get rid of them? Yeah, this should go pretty well in about 5 to 6 years. I can see that going pretty good. What really started this whole conversation that I'm talking about, you guys, is of course the good old-fashioned Facebook groups. I saw a post the other day of this guy complaining about the price of captive-bred caiman. Captive-bred dwarf caimans, usually from Nerd. I think they were somewhere around $1,200 to $1,500, which is a stellar deal, right? That's a good deal. And they were complaining like, oh, I want it for like $400. Why are they so expensive? You're getting a fucking dinosaur, dude. You are getting a crocodile. That thing you only see in zoos, you can obtain that thing and have it for your own personal enjoyment. But like $1,000 for literally taking home a zoo exhibit animal. You're complaining that $1,000 is too steep for you. What? Every other exotic zoo exhibit type animal, whether it be primates, monkeys, lemurs, tigers, lions, camels, anything like that, that go for, the lowest I've seen is like $4,000, getting up to 10 plus thousands of dollars. And yet the most expensive large zoo-like reptile that you can have, not counting mutations again, you can get for just a couple of grand. To this day, I will never understand that. Truly and fully believe that any large monitor lizard should have a price tag of over $1,000. It makes no sense why it should be any less. The amount of extra cash you're going to need to actually build that enclosure lets the breeder know that you have what it takes. If you can spend $1,000, you can spend $2,000 putting a nice enclosure together for that animal that's going to live, again, 15, 20 plus years and is going to need absolute, just the mansion that some of these lizards require. It's incredible. And yet people want them for the cheapest price. I don't get it. That's my ramble that I didn't script. I just started shooting stuff out of my head, so sorry if it's not as coherent as you would like it to be. But those are the reasons why I think reptiles should be more expensive than what they are. It'll keep people taking it a little bit more seriously. No more throwaway reptiles. There'll be way less neglect, in my opinion, and people, we can keep these large, you know, dangerous reptiles away from the wrong hands by putting that larger price tag on there, making them unattainable for people that truly aren't passionate about the species and want to keep it for what it is, not because you can get a big lizard for $60. It's my hot take for the day. Let me know what you think in the comment section. Oh boy, the comment section. I'm gonna post this on Facebook too, see how that goes as well. I think I just want to start a giant dumpster fire. In my mind, it doesn't seem like a really controversial piece, but I know people are gonna be very upset about the words I'm saying. I can just sense that right now. As always, my Bimson cult, I appreciate each and every one of you that make it this far in the video. As always, you know, we've got stuff going on in the description, including Patreon, that thing where you give me money and I give you bonus content. Sounds like a pretty stellar deal if I say so myself. Yeah, I think that's how I'm gonna end the video.